You can see they are busy tucking in to that buffalo that was bellowing last night. So there we go. They are getting all in there, and there's one female that's feeding. The rest of them all passed out. There's cubs in the background that are covered in everything that is buffalo and are lying on their backs. There you can see them. Look at that. So that's cubs that have had a long night and have had a good feed. You can see they're all covered in bits of blood and other things. So for those of you that are a bit squeamish, I think probably now is the best time to look away. But our Nkuhuma Pride has gotten its meal that we were hoping it would get, and it was a bit of a struggle to find them. We were a little bit just on the western side of where they are, and I'm so surprised as the sound and how far it's carried. But when I look from where we are now, I can actually just see the towers of the camp, and we're very high here. So the camp is just over that direction, and you can see we're high and it drops down, and so this sound just carried straight across, and that's why it sounded much closer than what we thought. But that's the general area there. You can see the little open section that goes up to quarantine in the distance. That's all that area over there. So the lions weren't actually as close as we thought they were. It's just that sound travels a lot more. But isn't this cool? And that buffalo is massive. It's actually the buffalo that we saw yesterday afternoon, as we know, at the dam. It was the last buffalo that left. You can see it's got the much shorter horns than the other two had. So it was that one right at the back. And unfortunately, I would imagine the lions picked up its scent from the dam itself and then followed it all the way through. So they celebrated their Lion Day in style with a massive food source. But you can see how she's getting in there, and you see her throat, you see how it's working. That I would imagine that she's been licking a bit of what's going on inside there. They often do drink the blood from the bottom of the carcass. She's also pulling and trying to use that tongue to get a bit more grip to be able to then eat some of the flesh around there. Now, Jacob, are you wondering how long? About half an hour. So I'd imagine that this buffalo unfortunately would have been dead at around 8:15, somewhere in that area, and that's when it would have succumbed to all of these lions. So they've been feeding on it for most of the night. That's why you're only seeing one lioness feeding. The rest are all flat sleeping. There's bellies everywhere, and there's just sort of lions lying all over the place at the moment. You can see another little cub has popped up its head. So they are lying around, and they've all had a fairly decent feed. They're not massive just yet, and they haven't eaten too much just yet, but they will. They know with a carcass of this size that they don't have to rush what's going on, and they will get more than enough food to sustain themselves. And as Alice says, some of the cubs look as though they are so content. I always love watching the females, though, feeding off a buffalo kill like this when they've had a bit of time to feed. It's the laziest thing you've ever seen. They just kind of sit there with their head and they chew away and they try and get some sort of food out of it, but they really just can't be asked to do it too much. And then you can see a bit of a full belly as well on one of the lionesses lying down. Now, I think the lioness that's feeding is the one that has the slightly discolored eye and looks like her. I can't see nicely. It might be the older female as well that has the wound, but it's difficult from the angle that we're at. All I've got is, the back of her head. So until such times as she turns and looks at us, it's going to be a bit tough to know who she is. But you can see there they've taken the innards out, so they would have gotten all of those tasty liver and kidneys and heart, and that's what they would have eaten first. They also then get rid of the stomach content so as not to spoil the meat, but you can see there is a lot of buffalo still left there. They've hardly really got stuck in there. Eaten a little bit away at the tail area as well, and then up in the chest where she is now is also where they're feeding. So they've eaten a little bit, but not as much as I actually thought they would. Given that they were quite skinny last night, I thought they would have gotten into this and really eaten a lot more, but it seems as though they're just content with what they have had, and they'll slowly but surely devour it. In fact, the female with the wound is right here. Seb, can you just go there quickly? Sorry, while she's got her leg like that so we can actually see the extent of this wound. So you can see there, it's quite a nasty hole that she's got, but it's not as bad as I thought. It's not as deep as I thought it would be. It's not pleasant, but it certainly isn't as deep. What is quite interesting there, and what's something that might later in life be of concern, is it closest to her teats? I wonder if it's not maybe damaged one of her teats, which means that if she has more than 3 cubs at this stage, it might be a bit of a problem, because it looks like that is right by one of her teats, and it looks as though it is a hole from a buffalo horn, I would imagine, would have caused that. Not this particular buffalo, because we saw it yesterday, but I would imagine that is unfortunately what has happened. But what you can see there is that it doesn't penetrate the stomach cavity, so it's not hit a vital organ. So while it looks really bad, it's very clean inside there. There's no maggots, there's no necrosis, and it's actually, she's done a really sterling job to keep that as clean as it is. And slowly but surely it will start to heal. You can actually see the tissue on the right corners there, that is healing, scarring tissue, and slowly but surely that will all come together and eventually it will be okay. But the problem with where it is it's rubbing. You can see there where it's been rubbing, so unfortunately it will rub a little bit, and it's going to take a long time for that to heal up, but it will. Now, Lisa, you say it looks as though the wound has gotten bigger. Well, it's probably what's happened is with the exertion of energy trying to catch this buffalo, she might have just split it open. Remember, when they grab buffalo and they're holding on, they're using all of their power, and they sometimes are being dragged, and her back leg might have just been pulled slightly, and it might have caused a little bit of a split and caused that to open up a little bit more. But it certainly doesn't look like an ugly wound. It's looking quite clean, so it's hopefully going to be okay. I remember, like I say, Mfumo's face looked horrific, and it looked a lot worse than that. You saw lots of black around the edges, and it didn't look good. Compared to that, it looks at least nice and clean, and hopefully in time it will all start to clean and all to heal up. The thing is with her, though, she still looks in good condition. It's not like she's looking bad at all. Unlike our cub here, who looks as though he's been rolling around in that buffalo. You can see there's all bits of nonsense all over him, and you'll find that they'll go over to one another and clean, and the cubs definitely have had a big meal. Look at the size of that belly. Oh, that is a massive belly. Now they're just going to bond with one another. You'll find that these lions, whenever this happens, is that they'll join up and they lie on each other and they hold each other's faces, and this is all part of the social practices of lions, and to make sure that the bond amongst them is strong. Are you uncomfortable? I would imagine by midday today these lions are not going to be as happy about having buffalo in their stomach, because they're going to start panting and be quite hot. And the thing is where they are now is right out in the open. There's very little shade where they are now. They've pulled that buffalo probably as far as they can, but there's really nowhere else they can take it. And so we will definitely see quite a number of vultures here by this afternoon, which I know Tara says she's a little jealous now, but this afternoon, when Tara comes, she's going to have a great time with all the vultures and hyenas this afternoon and evening. Now, Captain Murphy, you say you should think that the hyenas will be around here soon. Well, I suppose they should be. I mean, there was lots of tracks around Gowrie Cut Line, which is where the lions came in, and so I would imagine that yes, they will come in here, but probably only this evening. I don't think we'll see them this morning. If they haven't already arrived now, I don't think they'll be here. The other thing is that the hyenas from the Djuma clan, if there's not a lot of the high-ranking females, if it's just Gwen and Ribbon, both of those have young ones to look after, and they're not going to risk getting too close to lions and causing trouble, particularly because there's quite a number of lions here at the moment. They're not going to try and risk their lives while they've still got little ones, so you'll find they'll spend a bit of time away, and maybe tonight they'll come in and they'll just see what's going on, and if they see a lot of lions like this, then generally they back off. It's complete opposite with the clan at Elephant Plains. At Elephant Plains, whenever there's a buffalo carcass, you'll find that these hyenas that are there come in force, and you'll end up with sometimes 30 of them all around the carcass. And I've seen them chase the Nkuhumas off before. I've seen them chase off a number of different individuals as well. So, like I say, if you're a little bit on the squeamish side, it's probably best that you look away while we show you this lioness. So Taylor McCurdy, Miss McCurdy, what are you doing watching? You're supposed to be on leave and relaxing, but Miss McCurdy says, damn, she wishes she was back at work. Well, I'm sure, Taylor, don't worry. If this is the Nkuhuma's buffalo, hopefully they will stick around for the little bit, although I feel like these 3 buffalo that have been hanging around, this might be the last we see of them for some time. It certainly will be the last we see of this particular buffalo, but the others, unfortunately, I don't think are going to hang around too much anyway. But don't worry, Taylor, I'm sure you'll be back soon enough, and the sightings have been really good, and I hope that they will continue for Taylor, because I know that she really loves to see particularly the Nkuhumas. It's one of her favorite prides, and she's always looking for them. So don't worry, Taylor, I'm sure you'll be back soon, and there'll be buffalo around, and hopefully you'll be able to have a similar sighting when you get back from work. Now go back to bed and stay on leave. But it's amazing how she's with all the meat that there is at the moment, that she's latched onto the trachea of this buffalo. So you can see that would have come up from the lungs towards the throat, and I would have thought she would have gone for the softer rump meat that you see around the tail. And I believe a lot of you were wondering what that big white tube is, and like I say, that just comes from the lungs up into the mouth area, and that would have been responsible for helping with breathing. And it's strange to me because, like I say, there's rump meat, there's a lot of other flesh that's there, and I thought it would have been much easier to feed on that rather than trying to bite on what I would imagine would be a rather rubbery, rather chewy tube that they're on at the moment. So maybe it tastes better than the rest, who knows. But that's definitely the female with the discolored eye. You can see now that the light's hitting it, it actually does look quite opaque. It's not looking that good. I wonder if she can actually see out of it. It would be interesting to know. I was asking Tara about it last night, and she said she actually didn't really notice too much that it had any sort of glazing on it. So I wonder if it's not a little bit brighter than it used to be. But if there is some sort of opaque coloration there, I'm pretty sure that the eyesight out of that eye is not as good as it should be, or completely gone. But it would be interesting to know just how much she can see. Look at those canines as she chomps away. It's very cool. I'm so excited for the Nkuhuma Pride. I'm happy that they've finally managed to get a decent meal on Djuma again. It's been a long time since we've seen them on a buffalo carcass. In fact, I don't even know when the last time they were on a buffalo carcass. So Aaron, you're saying, take me back to the epic days of the Nkuhumas in 2016, and so good to see them on a buffalo kill. I know it was crazy to see how many buffalo they killed last year, and maybe this is an omen, maybe this is a sign of what's to come over the next 2 months. I remember the height of that sort of period where the Nkuhumas had that long run here on Djuma was around this time. It was August, September, if I'm not mistaken, July, August, September. So maybe it's a month later this year, and they will continue to be here for quite some time. As long as we can get some buffalo here, I'm pretty sure that they will stick around. And it just goes to show you that even though the buffalo are in far better condition than they were last year, and that there are so few around, that they haven't lost their technique and the way that they do things, because, well, they've managed to catch this buffalo quite easily last night. Well, not easily, but they've certainly done a good job. It's a massive buffalo bull that was not in bad condition at all, and this would have been a serious fight, as what we heard. We heard it go on for a number of minutes, and you can imagine that that buffalo would have been, from the moment we heard it, would have had lions on its back. So for 30 minutes it probably was trying to keep the lions at bay, and so these lions have really done well to do this. They haven't had too many opportunities at buffalo in the recent months, so it's good to see that they haven't lost their knack with them. But I'm just trying to see if all adult females are accounted for, because as Tara was tracking that other lion or lioness, it looked as though it might be a male lion track. One of the Birminghams does have quite small feet, but it seems as though all the lionesses are here. I can see 4 of them at the moment. I just can't see a 5th one, but maybe it is a lioness that walked off. I'd be very surprised though if one of the lionesses left this particular carcass. Now, I'm going to sit and enjoy this for as long as possible, because why wouldn't you want to bask in the glory that is the Nkuhuma Pride's meal? And while we do that, let's go back to Tara and see whether or not she still has the tracks for that other lion. Well, yes, breakfast will not go down well if you're watching this lion chomping down on the trachea of a buffalo, but she looks as though she's had a big meal. She's starting to pant a little bit. You can see a bit of licking of the chops, getting rid of all the blood that's on her mouth. But look at that there, the panting has already started. So these lions are going to be like that probably throughout the day. If she's panting now while it's still so cool, she's going to have a tough day ahead of her. But it's interesting that they've chosen Gari Dam to go and drink, because I would say this is about equidistance between Gari Dam and Buffelshoek Dam. Buffelshoek Dam is actually not far from us at all. It's just on the other side of this ridge too. So it's interesting that they're going to Gari Dam, and I'm glad they're going to Gari Dam, because it means that we will get to see them, and you guys will get to see them throughout the day and night. You'll find there'll be a lot of movement of them, particularly when it's warm like this. A lot of panting, they lose a lot of moisture, and they'll actually go down to water quite regularly. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see lions going down to the dam quite often in the next couple of days. And this buffalo kill should last them. It's a very decent sized buffalo, so this buffalo kill should definitely last them easily, I would say. Probably the next 2 days, maybe even 3. So they're going to be on this carcass for quite some time, I would imagine. And that means that there will be lots and lots of sightings of the Nkuhumas. Wouldn't that be nice? I'm pretty sure at some stage a Birmingham male is going to arrive here. I highly doubt the Nkuhumas are going to keep this a secret. As soon as we start to see vultures circling above us, we're going to have a situation where the Birminghams are definitely, and you can see she's looking up already. She's waiting for those vultures to start arriving. You say you really hope the Birmingham boys don't arrive and confiscate this kill. Well, I mean, it will be alright if there's just one. If one comes in, he'll have a good feed and he'll still allow the Nkuhumas to feed. I've seen Mfumo and Tino both share their buffalo with the Nkuhuma Pride, so it'll be fine. As long as we don't see 2 or 3 of them. If 2 or more rock up here, we're going to have a situation where this buffalo is going to get devoured in day, probably, and that's not going to be very good. So I'm hoping that the Nkuhumas really get a decent amount of food out of this, a good 2-3 days of feeding. Now I'm just having a look. I see 1, 2, 3, 4 lionesses. So there is 1 lioness that I haven't seen. Seb, do you see any more lionesses? I can only see 4. Yeah. It's the 4th one is at the back there, but I don't know. It looks like only the 4 lionesses are here. So maybe the tracks that Tara does have is a 5th one. But I would find that very strange if a lioness decided to move from this area. And the reason why I would find it so odd is because lions won't just leave a kill for any particular reason. Yes, to go and have water would be fine, but she's marched on a long way from there. The only time you ever see that is when lionesses have cubs, when they do that. But at the end of the day, we know that the Nkuhumas don't have cubs. None of them have got suckle marks. None of them have been pregnant the last few times we've seen them. So we have to sort of banish that idea from us. And for those of you thinking about that little cub that Ali saw, well, we've seen the Nkuhuma Pride so much since then. I highly doubt that it could be possible that that cub is still alive. It would really shock me if it was. But this female is now moving into the shade. I think she's decided it's too warm in the sun. The one with the hole in her belly. So there she is there. She's just moved a little bit into the shade. I'm sure she's going to lie down. But you can see she's walking fine, even though she's got that big wound. She's not in any way walking with discomfort. So as long as she can walk and move around, she's going to be perfectly fine, which is good to see. What I might do just now is I think I might reposition just now. We stopped here because, well, this is where we found them and saw them and thought that would be a good place to stop. But I might reposition shortly and just go a little bit forward where we might be at a better angle for you, Seb. I'll do it just now though. I just want to see this female. Look at how she digs her head in there. Isn't this amazing? And they almost separate the skin from the meat and they pull at those bits of meat that are attached, and she's at the moment going after all the big chunks of meat that will be on the shoulder blade area. Remember, buffalo have very powerful shoulder and neck areas to hold up those horns, and so that's what she's after, is nutrient rich muscle that grows all over that section. And she's going to dig in, and you'll see she'll lift her mouth up and she'll kind of crunch her face up as she tries to expose those teeth that will be able to grip that muscle that she can then pull out and get those chunks. And you also can see, look at how her tongue is working. Look at her throat area. You'll see that you can actually see the tongue moving up and down inside there. So that's her trying to get that tongue to grip and to lick off any bits that are attached to bone. At the end of the day, even if they can't grab chunks, they'll still lick off bits as they go. So she's trying to get some grip to be able to pull a chunk into her mouth and then grab it and pull it out like she's doing now. It's actually an amazing angle to see, because it's not something we see that often, is to watch how much the tongue plays a role in their feeding behavior. There we go. Fortunately, she's having spaghetti for breakfast, by the looks of it. Elizabeth, you're asking if they'll eat the hide as well. Yes, most certainly, Elizabeth, they will. That will be much later, though. You'll find that they'll start to eat the hide as the muscle content goes down, and then they'll start to kind of chew slowly on the hide, and it's more lazy crunching that they do. But it's not the best part of the meal, for sure. It's got a little bit of fat on it, but it's not much, and so they prefer to go after muscle and innards first and then get to the hide later. And what they leave, the hyenas and vultures will clean up. But if you see a buffalo carcass in 3 days' time, 2 days' time, we'll come back into this area, and you'll see that there will be nothing left of that skin. But look at this lioness. You see what she's doing? She's dragging dirt. You see she's kicking it back over. So what she's trying to do is she's trying to reduce the amount of scent that is being pushed out by this buffalo carcass. When they pull out the rumen and the blood, it has a very powerful, strong scent to it. And so what she's trying to do is just to cover that up so that the scent doesn't waft into the air and things like hyenas and the Birmingham boys then arrive here. So that's why she's doing it. Unfortunately for her, though, the vultures are going to be their downfall. There's going to be many a vulture that's going to spot this. There's in no way that they're going to hide it where they are. It's far too open here, and so that vulture, the predators. While I'm repositioning, I believe Tara has had a few alarm calls that she's heard, so let's go across to her and just see whether or not she's heard any more, or if she's figured out where they are. Well, it is wonderful that they have got something to eat. I'm also happy for the cubs because they're looking massive. There's one that's actually standing at the back there, Seb. I don't know if you can see him, but look at the size of what they look like now with those full bellies, looking almost like adults. I suppose we're going to have to stop calling them cubs soon. We're going to have to start calling them sub-adults in the next few months. They're getting to that size now where they're no longer playful little balls of fur. They've now become these sort of big lions that are going to be helping out with kills soon. I wonder if they actually, any of them did participate in what went on last night. It would be interesting to know. So Lauren from Illinois, you say one of the cubs is so dirty it's going to have a hard time to get clean. Well, yes, I think Mom is not going to be impressed when she sees how dirty these cubs are. There's another one that's lying closer to us that is absolutely filthy. It is covered in all kinds of stomach content and blood and everything else, and so it's going to be a long grooming session to keep these guys very clean. But what I can confirm is that there is only 4 females here. There's definitely not a 5th female. I don't know where she could be. Maybe she's lying in the grass somewhere. It's difficult to see them in this grass. The grass is the perfect coloration for them, but I cannot see a 5th female anywhere, which is quite puzzling to me. I don't know if it's maybe Amber Eyes who's on one of her missions and going somewhere. You never know. Maybe a Birmingham boy was calling, and instead of it coming to the carcass, one of the females has just distracted him and taken him away a little bit and will come back later. You never know. These things can happen. I've seen with females doing it before where they lure males away from areas, so it might be that. But there certainly is one female that is not here at the moment. But all 6 cubs are present, which is good, and none of them are sporting any injuries. I've seen all 6 of them standing up. We've seen the females moving around, so you always worry when they have these buffalo kills, because a buffalo can be a nasty animal, and as we were talking about with the female with the hole in her tummy, they can get their own back. So whenever you see them after a buffalo kill, it's always good just to see everybody's moving okay and not limping or not sustained any bad injuries. Little cub, you are dirty already. Don't worry about putting your paws in places. It's almost gingerly trying to step through the stomach content, as you can see there. But don't stress, you are already full of it. So rather clean yourself before you worry about it. Moodle, you say absolutely filthy. Well, yes, like I say, Mom's not going to be impressed, but they will get themselves clean. You'll be surprised at how clean they will look by this afternoon. They'll pretty much get groomed by the Pride, and they'll start to look a lot better than what they do now. Oh. Always love when they flop down on one another, and you can see they're rolling around. It always entertains me when they do this. But look at the female that's standing up. She's got her head right in there, and she's grabbing what looks like bits of organs. I wonder if there isn't still some of the organs left inside there. I can't see very nicely. Obviously it's a small dark cavity, but it looks like she's got something. There we go. See? I wonder if that's not a bit of the lung, because the trachea on the other side was attached to that, so I wonder if that's not a bit of the lung that she's just gotten now. Whatever it is, it seems like it's quite chewy, because it's not exactly going down quickly. There we you go, she puts her head in again. Now the female that's grabbing all of that stuff is the one with the hole in her stomach, and just looking at her, the rest of her body looks fine, and she doesn't seem as though she's struggling in any way. She's been walking around quite a bit, and she seems to be walking with no discomfort whatsoever, so I think she'll be just fine. The problem that she's going to have, and I wonder if that's why she's feeding the way she's feeding, instead of the other female that's lying down and sitting, I wonder if she's standing like that just to stop all that bit of blood and rumen getting actually into that cavity. It would be interesting if she was like that, and she was aware of that wound and that it was uncomfortable maybe to sit like that, and that's why she's keeping standing. But look at the power in her shoulders as she goes in there, and the power in her back legs. Look at those muscles. Isn't that amazing? These animals are so muscular, it is incredible, and that will be all the power that they'll be using to try and pull these buffalo down when they were doing it last night. Look at this rippling of muscle in the shoulder blade as well. Very, very big girls. And they're looking super healthy, which is great news as well. They're not looking as though there's any sign of that mange coming back or that white muscle disease, which was plaguing them at a similar time last year. So it really is good to see. And even though it's been a tough time with not very many buffalo, the Nkuhuma still have managed to do the deed and make sure that they've got what they need to survive. So, Andy, you were wondering if the buffalo migrate to Djuma like the buffalo migrate to the Mara. Well, Andy, no, not really. So it doesn't quite work like that here in the Kruger Park area. The buffalo, they are transient and they do move around, but there's no fixed migration pattern. So in the Mara, you'll have a pattern of what goes on. The wildebeest will come in and they'll go then to, the Mara River, spend some time in the Mara Triangle, and then they go back down towards the Grumeti River and into the Serengeti and down that area. And they also cross the Sand River in places too. But here in South Africa, the buffalo are pretty much, they follow rains, but the rains are very different every year. We don't have the same situation where we get, rains forming in a circular pattern like you do in the Mara, and that means that you end up with a situation where you end up seeing the buffalo going into wherever the rain has fallen. So in this year, the rain fell in the far north of the Kruger and the far south of the Kruger, or this last rain season, should I say. And so the buffalo seem to be packing down on the southern parts and in the northern parts and on the river systems that are in the Kruger, whereas the year before there was more rain here in the Sabi sands in the central parts, and that meant that we had a lot more buffalo in this area the year before. So they are not as migratory, a fixed migration, but they do move around according to rain patterns and where they can actually find food and decent grazing. But I mean, these buffalo that you see here, this is probably one of the first buffalo that we've seen in the last 2 weeks, and they only crossed onto the property about 2 days ago. They were seen 2 days ago up in Buffelshoek, and they came south. I saw their tracks yesterday, and then obviously we saw them at the dam yesterday afternoon. So they really haven't been here for very long, and it just shows you that as soon as the lions can find their scent, they will actively follow them. Because remember, these buffalo were at the dam and they moved and they've then been killed here. This buffalo wouldn't have been chased for a long period of time before it was caught. These buffalo were probably in the drainage section and then were chased up out of the drainage to here. Nikki, you're asking if I've ever seen a buffalo launch itself at a lion. Well, yes, I have, many times. I've actually seen buffalo beating off lions and chasing off lions more than I've seen lions killing buffalo in terms of the actual standoff. So it often happens that lions will go after buffalo, and particularly in the bigger herds of buffalo, that the whole herd turns around and comes running at them and chasing them off. But you'll find with big bulls like this, they will also try and defend themselves. I was talking about a highlight sighting I've had of lions yesterday with the 3 prides that were trying to take down a buffalo, and that buffalo bull was doing its utmost best to chase off the lions. It charged at the lions multiple times before the lions then severed its back tendons, and even though it only had 2 legs to work on, it was still dragging itself and chasing the lions away. So I have seen them launch themselves at lions a few times, and it's a serious power that they do so, and they'll hit trees over and bushes. And what they try and actually do, and what I'm sure this buffalo tried to do, if you actually look where it is at the moment and you look on the tree itself, just above the back of the buffalo there, you can see just there, that there is actually bark that has come off of that tree. So what would have happened is this buffalo probably tried to reverse its bum up against the tree to stop the lions getting to its backside, and then it's using its horns around the tree to keep the lions at bay. So they often do this. They'll try and find a thicket or a tree that they can use as a barrier for their back, and then they start to fight it off from there. So it does happen like that, and it seems as though that buffalo was there for quite a while, just judging by the amount of bark that has actually been pulled off of that particular bush willow and the amount of cambium that's been exposed from it. There you go, you can see a little bit more as well where it would have fallen eventually over there. It looks like this one lioness might be going off and going for a drink. I see she's disappearing, the one that was feeding. She's walking straight down towards Agari Dam, so there she goes. There's a cub there, and she's then just disappearing through that direction over there. So you'd imagine that she might be heading off for water, or she's going towards shade. There's a lot more shade down in the area where she's going, but I would think that she might be going for water, so just keep an eye on the dam cam. Excuse me, everybody. Sorry, thank you, Seb. It's unfortunately a bit of dust in the air this morning, so have a little sneeze. Or you never know, maybe the 5th lioness is down in that area as well. It could be. See, she's just stopped now in the shade. Is there another lioness down there? Let me get my binoculars out. Well, she's just disappeared in the shade, but I don't see any others. There might be another one down that area. But you'll find that what these lions are going to have to do, unfortunately, is there's always going to have to be 1 or 2 that stay behind and just do guard duty, because if they leave the carcass for 2 seconds, the vultures will be down and they'll be starting to feed. You can see they've eaten quite a bit off the face, and then that's that big neck structure that I was telling you about, lots of muscle content in the neck, and so the vultures will come down and try and clean that up quite quickly. So 1 or 2 of them are going to have to stay and basically brave the sun, and the rest will then find a shady area to go and lie down. Hopefully they will find some decent shade. There's at least a termite mound here that might provide a bit of shade for the day that's quite close to the kill that they'll be able to use. Oh, have you had enough now, girl? She's going to try from this front end. Sammy Jane, you're wondering if lions will ever regurgitate when they overeat. I have seen it before a couple times. There was a lioness from the Styx Pride, the old lioness, and she used to do it every now and then. And basically, yeah, they would feed, and then all of a sudden she would just get sick. And it was normally if they'd eaten a lot of hide, and the hide is quite tough and sinewy, and it's not digesting properly, then they just regurgitate that out. I very seldom see them regurgitate after they've eaten chunks of meat. It's normally towards the back end of the carcass when they've been eating the hide and lots of fur and a bit of bone that maybe they're not able to digest properly, and then they'll regurgitate that out. But it's not that common. You don't see it at every kill. It's that particular female did it quite often, but the rest of the pride's not as much. Are you going to come and say hello to Mom? There we go, little bonding head rub, which is always so cool to see with lions. They do it often. We know that leopards do it with their cubs as well, but it's just so much more with lions. You can see probably will go in and start feeding, and they take turns like this. Now that they've got this food source, you'll find when one walks off, another one will then come in, and each one just takes its time to feed. There's not going to be too much fighting going on now. They've all had at least a bit of a meal, and bellies are slightly full, so there's no need to fight with one another when there's still so much food available to them. What amazes me with this is that if you had male lions here, you would see the amount of food that those guys can eat would have been almost double what these females are going through. They really do pack it away, and the damage to that buffalo would have been a lot more had one of the Birmingham boys been here. I've actually seen those Birmingham boys, when there were still the 5 of them, demolish a buffalo of this size overnight. So they killed it on the drive, and by the end of by the next morning, they had already finished and left it, and there was just a skeleton and a leg that was left over, and the hyenas were then getting stuck in. It was quite actually amazing to see how quickly they ate that buffalo. I suppose 5 male lions is a lot of size and a lot of stomach to fill. I think this female is She's trying to work out what she wants to do. You see she was grabbing it at one point there, and I think she was trying to roll it and trying to open that softer underbelly and maybe trying to get some of the meat that's on that hind leg that's lying up against the ground. You might find that they came in from the back end and they've actually eaten a lot around that top leg, but now she wants the food around the bottom leg, and so they often do that. They try and roll the carcass, but it's still probably too heavy for her to roll it just yet. She's going to unfortunately have to still eat quite a bit before they'll be able to do that. Maritza, you're saying that soon this lioness will be practically wearing her meal with the way that she was going inside there earlier. Well, yes, it's quite something. I've seen cubs actually with giraffe carcasses disappear inside them. So you find they go in from the rib section and they're completely inside. And I'm talking about cubs that are a similar size to what we see here with the Nkuhuma cubs, and they just disappear in the carcass. You can't see anything but maybe a little tail sticking out or an ear flicking in places. So they do sometimes get right in there, and that's to get to all those little bits that they like. You'll find that there's probably some sort of meat or organ that they want, and that's why they tend to burrow inside and get what they need. But she's almost looking at that carcass as if to say, I want more, but I just really can't be asked to actually do it. You can see she's kind of panting and heavy breathing, looking longingly at it. But I'm afraid, girl, you don't have any more space inside. Or maybe she does. There you go. You can see she's experienced. She's the eldest of these lions that we have here, and that experience shows the way that she's going, covering everything up. She's the one that's keeping the housekeeping done to make sure that they keep their buffalo. So well done, girl. And the cubs will learn this from her. Michael, you want to know if this behavior is learned or instinctive? I think it's a bit of both. You know, the cubs will be watching what she's doing and will probably mimicking that at some point in their life, but there's probably some sort of instinct in that they need to reduce the scent so as not to attract the attention of others, but it will be a bit of learned behavior as well. When they're younger, they see the adults doing it, and then when they get older, they will do the same thing. But you can see just how deep she was inside that carcass. Look at her chest where the blood is. You can see she kind of climbed in all the way to her front legs then. In fact, her one leg must have been inside, because the one leg has got blood all over the place. You're also going to have to do a lot of grooming to get clean. Lovely, now she's urinating at the carcass. Lions are not sometimes the cleanest animals. They do sometimes pee where they eat. Oh well, there's lots of dust around. It'll absorb quite quickly, at least. It's a dry period. You can actually see where she's scratching now. There's still an organ that will be one of those stomachs. But remember that buffalo has those 4-chambered stomachs, so that'll be one part of it that's still there and still filled with rumen. Now, they will eat it, but generally they only eat the stomach lining. So as it kind of breaks apart, they'll then start to break it and get some of the lining off and out, and then feed off that. Mary Kay, you say it must smell horrible and it must be covered up. Well, it actually doesn't smell too bad right now. It's an interesting smell. It's kind of a wet grass, blood kind of smell. I don't know if you know the smell of blood. It's got that kind of irony smell to it. So it smells like that now because it's still so fresh. There really isn't any rotting smell yet, but I can tell you by the time we get here this afternoon, it's most certainly not going to be pleasant at all. It's going to be rather pungent and not going to be very nice at all. You are spraying dirt all over your meat. You're going to have crunchy meat just now. Maybe that's like their salt and pepper, is to throw a bit of sand and soil on there, but it won't smell too bad now. But as the day goes and that sun really bakes it, it's going to start smelling horrific, and by this time tomorrow it really will be unpleasant, and the following morning after that it'll be almost unbearable downwind. That's when it really becomes quite something, and the maggots and that will start to form by this afternoon, and like I say, by tomorrow they will be in full force, and you'll actually see the maggot larvae inside of that buffalo. You can already see there's some flies that are hanging around and they'll start to lay their eggs inside the meat. So it's going to be soon that will be happening. But it's interesting, this particular buffalo, yesterday I was watching it as it walked away. We didn't unfortunately get too much time with the buffalo yesterday. There was so much else going on at the dam that we didn't pay that much attention to them. But if you look at its horn structure, it looks like a young male, just given that it's got quite small horns. You see those horns turn quite a bit, but if you go down a little bit and you look at its boss, which is that helmet-like structure on top, that boss is very gnarled and very grooved and has got a lot of damage to it, which means that this is a much older bull. So it's a bull that is in his sort of older years. Now, when we talk about old buffalo bulls here in the Sabi Sands, most of the bulls will very seldom go past 15 years because of the lions, and as they slow down, the lions go after them. But that will be a bull that's probably, I would say, over 10 already, but interestingly enough, got horns that are tiny. Those horns are horns that I would expect on a 2-3-year-old buffalo, not on a big bull. So I saw it yesterday when he was walking off and noticed how small they were. Mita, who's 8 years old. Hello, Mita. It's always good to hear from you, and you always ask such nice questions. And you want to know if we can come back later and have a look at the horns once the lions are gone and see if anything's grown on it. Well, Mita, we most certainly can. When we're doing our bushwalks, I will promise you that I will come here in a month or two, and once all the meat has been cleaned off, and we'll come and see if anything's happening to our buffalo carcass and if we can even find it. Because remember, Mita, now there's going to be lots of lions eating it, and then the hyenas come, and sometimes they drag the head away and it's going to be difficult to find it. But we'll definitely try, Mita, and I'll definitely see if I can show you. But what we can do in the meantime, Mita, is before that is I can maybe try and go and find some of the buffalo's heads from last year, from the drought. Because remember, we had lots of buffalo that died last year, and so I can go and show you some of those that are a year old, and we'll see if anything's growing on them already. I would imagine that yes, we'll see some things growing on them, but I will definitely try. So if you're watching tomorrow morning or this afternoon, just let me know, and then I'll be able to go and have a look for one of those skeletons or one of those skulls for you, and we can see if there isn't anything growing on them. But there are quite a few vehicles that would like to come here, given that it is the Nkuhuma's first buffalo kill in quite some time. So unfortunately, I think we're going to have to start moving on. We have had a wonderful morning with them already, and we've been very privileged to be able to spend as much time as we have. And so we're going to probably head off in the next 5 minutes or so. We'll just enjoy a last little sighting of these guys. Oh, look at them, they're all kind of sprawled out now, some very big tummies. By the looks of it, the cubs got the lion's share of what was eaten last night. Look at that tummy. It's about as round as he is tall at this stage, or she, should I say. You can see one of the females in the back there. The females don't look as though they ate as much. I think they almost stood guard while the cubs scoffed down as much as possible. They are at least full, but they're not massive like they can sometimes be. I always find that the females tend to eat a little bit more in moderation than what the males do. The males tend to get so big and rounded that they can't move, and I suppose it's typical to human life. Boys tend to eat a lot more than the ladies. As you can see, the feeding is very lazy at the moment. Look at how that one is eating. It's almost like, oh, I'll shove it down because I have to, but I don't really want to. Listen, you can actually hear the skin as it's chewing. Oh, it's stopped chewing on the skin now. There's a few little growls there, which is quite typical of the cubs. The cubs get quite feisty on a carcass, and it's particularly if they can see the other one. And at the moment there's still a lot of meat, but when this meat gets less and less, and I would imagine this afternoon, bless you, I also was sneezing just now, I know it's in the air, isn't it? But if this gets a little bit less, then you'll find the cubs get quite feisty with one another over the bits of meat that are left, and so you'll find then that they'll fight quite a bit and lots of growling. So I'm sure Tara's in for a treat this evening as they start to feed again when the sun starts to go down, so it'll be interesting to watch. I see one of the cubs has just perked up its ears and facing southwards. I wonder if that fifth lioness isn't coming back this way. We'll take a little drive that way and just see if there isn't anything in that side. I don't think so, but we will have a little look. Do you see? You see how those ears have perked up? And is just watching what's going on. Right. Like I say, we're going to unfortunately have to leave now and let some of the others come into this area and enjoy the sighting as much as we have. And while we do that, let's go back to Tara, who doesn't have a leopard, but apparently she's received some news on them.